Good afternoon, Facebook. So, today is April the 21st, Tuesday, April 21st, and it's 1:34 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Again, Tuesday, April 21st, 2020, 1:34 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. Sorry for the redundancy. I can never quite tell based on the way the live stream screen is set up exactly where this begins. So, it looks like we're good to go at this point. Let's examine today's numbers. Just going to look domestically today, not worldwide. The United States currently is reporting 804,759 cases and 43,995 deaths. New York State, as I predicted yesterday, has now passed the 250,000 mark with 256,555 positive or confirmed cases. 19,693 New Yorkers have lost their lives. In the state of Washington, we have now passed 12,000, a total of 12,085 positive or confirmed cases. 652 Washingtonians have perished from the disease. And Nebraska. Nebraska, 1,648 positive or confirmed cases. 33 Nebraskans have died from coronavirus as of today. Nebraska always felt, even while I was living there and didn't have a whole lot to compare it to, Nebraska always felt like kind of like it was in a little bit of a bubble, like it wasn't affected hardly at all by anything going on the coasts or elsewhere in the world. Nebraska always felt very sheltered, and these figures kind of reflect that. It's Nebraska is not doing as well as states like Wyoming or Alaska, but Nebraska is not nearly as affected by coronaviruses as the rest of the world, but it is affecting them. Their lives have been interrupted, just like the lives of most Americans have been interrupted. Now, yesterday, I mentioned that there was a study in Santa Clara County, California. The type of study that we're talking about was what is called a seroprevalence survey. What is seroprevalence? Well, technically, seroprevalence is the level of pathogen in a population as measured in blood serum. This study in Santa Clara County, California, was able to determine that based on the antibodies found in the blood tests, many more people than has been reported in these studies, that, or rather these figures that I read out each day, have had the disease and recovered from it than was previously reported or estimated. And the amount of the variance is startlingly huge. There has been some pushback against this, as I anticipated there would be. For instance, according to an article yesterday in mercurynews.com, researchers are engaged in a fierce debate over the startling estimates in a Stanford study that suggested as many as 81,000 people could already have been infected with coronavirus in Santa Clara County, with some of the world's top number crunchers calling the study sloppy based on an example of how not to do statistics. And that story goes on with a bunch of people who just pounced viciously all over this study. They didn't like what it suggested, and they were very quick to attack it and to undermine its credibility and to encourage anybody who comes across it to ignore it. And I could speculate as to what might motivate someone to want to draw attention away from this. But maybe it's a better idea just to look at this story here. Now, this is from the University of Southern California in Los Angeles County, which is about 340 miles south of Santa Clara County. Early antibody testing suggests COVID-19 infections in Los Angeles County greatly exceed documented cases. This is a separate study in a separate place, conducted by a separate institution than the one I talked about yesterday. And it points to very much the same results. Even within the same numerical range, let's say, the same information is being discovered in a different study, in a different place by a different institution than the one I referenced yesterday. And they point to the exact same thing. Let me dive in a little bit with this LA County test. University of Southern California and the Los Angeles County Department of Public Health on Monday released preliminary results from a collaborative scientific study that suggests infections from the new coronavirus are far more widespread and the fatality rate much lower in Los Angeles County than previously thought. The results are from the first round of an ongoing study by the University of Southern California researchers and county health officials. They will be conducting antibody testing over time on a series of representative samples of adults to determine the scope and the spread of the pandemic across the country. Now, this right here is key. Based on the results of the first round of testing, the research team estimates that approximately 4.1% of the county's adult population has an antibody to the virus. Adjusting the estimate for statistical margin of error implies about 2.8 to 5.6% of the county's adult population has an antibody to the virus, which translates to approximately 221 to 442,000 adults in the county who have been infected. That estimate is 28 to 55 times higher than the 7,994 confirmed cases of COVID-19 reported to the county at the time of the study in early April. The number of COVID-related deaths in the county has now surpassed 600. So, when I was talking about this yesterday, the Santa Clara County study had the total number of infections based on the presence of these antibodies in people's blood they were reporting it as like 1,000 people in Santa Clara County at the time they did that study. That was the official number. Whereas the number that was suggested by these studies put it at between like 41 and 80,000. Okay, so the variance was huge, but the variance in the Los Angeles County study is similar. They are reporting a number similar to that which was found 340 miles north in Santa Clara County. These two separate studies have found the same thing, which means that far more people in California alone than was initially suspected have caught this disease, barely even noticed they had it, got better, and then went back to their lives. Which means that the lethality rate, the fatality rate of this disease is way, way, way lower than is being reported by institutions such as the Centers for Disease Control and the World Health Organization. I'm going to withhold from suggesting or insinuating that this discrepancy is intentionally animated. For now, that's just sort of my indignation talking, although there's a lot of pretty tempered thought and study going into that idea, and I kind of want that to flesh itself out a little bit before I delve in too deeply. But the truth is that we are just not to a point yet where we truly understand the nature of coronavirus and just how deadly it really is. The way it's being reported, like in the United Kingdom, 13% of people who catch it die from it. Same in Italy. In the United States, it's around, 4.4 last time I did the numbers. Germany was under 3%. But if what is being discovered in these seroprevalence surveys is true, or even kind of true, then those percentages will quickly plummet down to under 1%, even under 0.5% in many areas. And the opposition to this that we're seeing also bears scrutiny. Why would anybody not want this to be true? That the disease is, in fact, far less lethal than the official numbers suggest that it is? Why would anybody not want that to be true? Well, that remains a topic for another day. So, let's look a little bit at the politics of this. 60% of Democrats blame Trump more than they blame China for coronavirus. Most Democrats think that Donald Trump is more to blame for this pandemic than China is to blame for it. This is from RasmussenReports.com. The latest Rasmussen Reports national telephone and online surveys find that 42% of all likely United States voters agree with United States Senator Chris Murphy's recent statement, and I quote, "The reason that we are in this crisis, that we are here today," let's see, I misread that. "The reason that we're in the crisis that we are today is not because of anything that China did. It's not because of anything that the World Health Organization did. It's because of what President Trump did." 47% disagree with the Connecticut Democrat, and 11% are undecided. Well, when I watch the White House press briefings, and when I listen to the type of questions that are being asked by people like CBS's Paula Reed, people like CNN's Jim Acosta, others, questions like, "At this time, when the United States has lost more than 40,000 people to coronavirus, is it really the appropriate time for you, Mr. President, to come out here and congratulate yourself on camera? Is that really..." What kind of question is that? Every day, the federal government, the administration, and the president himself are subjected to relentless attacks. And not just about the coronavirus, going all the way back to 2015, June of 2015, these kinds of questions have been aimed relentlessly and tirelessly at the president and anyone associated with him. And so, when the president comes out and is able to report decisively and with documentation that his policies have helped this country throughout this crisis and have saved many thousands of lives, and when that sentiment is echoed and reinforced by trusted experts like Doctors Fauci and Birx, it's only natural the president would seek to push back against this. These press briefings are not reporters asking questions from an objective or nonpartisan standpoint. They are attacks, they're fights, attempts to trap, to taunt, and to debate the president They've already decided what it is they think, and it's nothing but an attack. There was one when Dr. Fauci stepped forward and clarified something that he'd said in a Sunday morning interview. And whatever it was that was stated in this interview was whipped up into a frenzy of spin to suggest that there was division between Dr. Fauci and between President Trump. And he came out and he clarified what he said. And he did so unequivocally, gutting the media narrative that Trump was about to fire him. And after he did so, one reporter, I think it was Paula Reed, had the audacity to sit there and ask of Dr. Fauci, "Are you doing this voluntarily? Or are you being made to do this?" And he just shot that down in a heartbeat. He said, "Don't even imply that." But when these are the kind of reporters, and when these are the kind of sentiments within the mainstream news media who are covering and reporting on this, it makes perfect sense to me that, again, 60%, most Democrats blame Trump more than they blame China for the coronavirus. It is not a controversial sentiment that China hid the truth about this, that they withheld vital information from being reported, which in turn deprived the rest of the world of the ability to properly and adequately prepare their own populations and protect their citizens. It's a well-documented truth that the World Health Organization was at the very least contributorily negligent in this cover-up. Complicit might be a better word. But we'll see what we'll see as that ongoing investigation yields results. And I'm going to withhold further comment until then, but I have my suspicions. And I have some half-baked theories about what's motivating it, but I'm not ready to really flesh that out yet. I might not ever be. I just don't think it's time yet for me to voice any cogent thought about why this is going on. It's just sort of a feeling. It's the recognition of patterns that I've been observing casually for many years, and only recently I've really started trying to make some intellectual sense of it, but I'm nowhere close to being able to really comment on it. But I think that many people are being encouraged not to blame the communist Chinese government, not to blame the World Health Organization, but rather to blame our own country. And while that is happening, and while it is also emerging the very, very strong and very real possibility that many, many people, more than what's been reported, have caught this disease and gotten better from it, and that the fatality rate is probably a lot lower than is being officially reported. People are trying to suppress that. People are trying to attack that idea too. All the while, there are governors here in the various states who are arresting people or attempting to arrest people if they are caught taking a walk alone on a beach somewhere. People are being encouraged to snitch on each other. If you look out your window and you see somebody cooking a steak on a grill in their backyard with a neighbor who doesn't actually live there but is maybe standing possibly a couple inches closer than 6 feet away, people are being encouraged to contact the authorities and have that person arrested. If some preacher wants to do a drive-in sermon and address a bunch of people who are sitting in their cars with the windows up, then you send in the authorities on that too. We don't want to examine things like these seroprevalence studies. We don't want to examine the World Health Organization and their culpability in all this. No, we want to suggest that this lockdown and this paralysis of the United States economy has to continue until there is a vaccine 18 months from now. There is something pushing this. There is a predictability, there's an internal logic, there's a distinctive flavor to this. And it's going to continue. It's going to continue for a long time. I notice here that an old friend of mine, Sean Vitek, has left a comment on my live stream. Let me read that aloud. It's definitely propaganda more than news. China and World Health Organization said COVID was not transmitting between people as late as January 19th. Yes, that's true. I've noticed that. I think I've even commented on it here. I have kind of fallen in love with the writing style of somebody who writes for nationalreview.com. I think his name is Victor Davis Hanson. He has an article entitled, this was just published today, "It's a Free Country, Brother." I think this is Victor Davis Hanson, but I somehow managed to leave off the byline for this article. I'm just going to begin with the opening paragraph. I really like the way this guy writes. In this current crisis, the longest, if not the first complete shutdown in United States history, the freedoms of American democracy are being tested in ways we scarcely ever imagined. Out of nowhere, little Napoleonic governors arise to enact decrees prohibiting gardening or strolling on an empty beach. Decrees that seem to have little purpose other than to reflect that they can do so. Snitches volunteer to out felonious social deviants who are seen cooking in the backyard with a neighbor. A little horned devil virus seems to be trying to do what those Ruskies never could. Experts with all sorts of PhDs, MDs, and JDs after their names lecture from authority about what we must do right now, or else, on the principle that they have a scientific or technocratic prerogative to impress critics of their modeling or their demand that we shut down a $22 trillion economy for 18 months if need be. A supposedly disinterested media, found by media watchdogs to be 93% negative in its presidential reportage before the virus, envision their coverage of the Trump demon as an endless zero-sum game in which any morsel of good news for him is instantly bad for them. In short, if American democracy were to fail to sustain itself under myriad pressures, then this would be the moment. For some, the 60s can at last be made manifest, especially given that its aging children just impeached an American president on articles nowhere found in the Constitution after weaponizing the FBI, the CIA, and the DOJ in an attempt to abort a presidential campaign and then presidency. How fortunate, then, that in this current crisis, when one questions the logic of using a misleading denominator to ascertain viral lethality, and thus the logic of basing existential public policies on resulting case-to-fatality rates that admittedly cannot be true, one can, at least for now, keep raising skepticism without being sent to a Chinese-like re-education camp. We are witnessing the fading moments of baby boomer generation authority. As it vaporizes, it still cannot fundamentally change America with sermons that we will never go back to normal, a synonym for we don't like lots of things in that bothersome Constitution. America is currently engaged in a freefall of angry, unfettered discussion about everything from the wearing of masks to the efficacy of hydroxychloroquine. Tempers rise, false knowledge replicates. Smackdown arguments from authority grow shrill, and, thank God, it all remains legal. Out of the mess, the acrimony can lead to light rather than endless heat. And that story goes on. That's just a bit of a flavor of this guy's writing. I agree with him. I agree with the way that he's characterizing this. And I agree that this is going to be an interesting fight to observe. The reopening of the United States economy, the attempt to bring life back to normal, is going to be met with fierce opposition. Opposition that will be obscured behind a cloud of suffixes, PhD, MD, etc. The true motivations are going to be camouflaged as vigorously as possible in an insistence that only they know what's best for the population of this country, and only they know how properly to protect us from it. And that's the attitude that we're seeing all the time these days. The very same people who point out to us these invisible problems and then prove their existence with a bunch of computer models and sell the idea that there's no possible way that anyone with half a brain could possibly disagree with them. They also sell themselves as being the only people who've identified a solution, who have access to that solution, and who know how to implement that solution. And when you challenge them, even with documented factual proof, you experience an inexhaustible cascade of rage directed right at you. I've been seeing this happen all my life, and I'm seeing it happen here within the context of the coronavirus pandemic. Thank you all for listening. Be good to each other.